everyone, welcome to the Dyl Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and it's time to get into The Substance, the newest film that came out last week, the newest horror film that came out, I should say. A lot of films have been coming out lately, including New York Film Festival, which starts literally tonight. So I have a busy crop of films to get to over the next few weeks. So you're going to see a lot of reviews on the channel, but I didn't want to get into New York Film Fest coverage until I got to talk about The Substance, because right now, as it stands, I mean, there's like kind of a 3-horse race going on right now between I Saw the TV Glow, Challengers, and this film, but this could be my favorite film of the year. I mean, once this whole year is said and done, once I've seen this film again, once I've been able to like absorb it even further into my twisted little brain, because this is a twisted little film, I do think that this could potentially be my favorite movie of the year with some time. Now, as I said, it's a 3-horse race, so I'm not going to definitively say it yet, but it is a film nonetheless that I needed to talk about. I wanted to talk about. I wanted to recommend for people who haven't seen it. I'm not going to get into big spoilers because I think a lot of the beauty of this film, beauty is a hard word to use in this film because this film dissects beauty in such a fascinating way, but a lot of the marvel of this film is kind of finding the surprise factor in all these little kind of twists and turns and reveals. You think you know where it's going, but you really don't until it goes there, and then you think you found where it's gone, and then it goes even further. I mean, this is one of those films that is going to kind of get, I don't want to say meme to death because that has like more negative connotation, like people are making fun of it, but this is going to be something that I could see being one of those like viral sensations where people like discover this film after the fact on streaming or just through word of mouth. This feels like something you would like hand your friend a VHS of back in like the 80s or 90s, and people would be like, oh my gosh, you got to check this film out, but wait till your parents go to bed and watch it, at late at night, turn the lights off, watch this movie. It's got that feel, like that midnight movie feel, but it's also got this prestige because the director, Coralie Farge, she is a French filmmaker, and she's a filmmaker that I think we're going to hear a lot more of in the next coming years as her career is hopefully going to blow up even further. She made a film, Revenge, a few years ago. I actually haven't seen that. I need to check it out. But because it is a French film, there's also this like layer of prestige too. It doesn't feel like a midnight movie romp in like the kind of camp feel. There is some camp to be had here, but it also has this like level of prestige and experimentation and like just refinery that just makes it so compelling, because it's like you're watching this glorious work of art, but what is underneath the surface is something so vile and like disgusting at times and gory and bloody and mushy and gushy, and it's just a really great blending of all these different tones that I feel like can appeal to most people. And I think that's the hardest thing with a lot of experimental art house horror, is that it's so alienating for some groups of people because people either get too grossed out by something, they don't understand the metaphor of something else. But here I think the metaphors are very clear and they make them very obvious, but the blood and gore and guts they don't hold back on either, so it can satisfy those people who want something a little bit more overt in their metaphor, not too heady and hard to grasp, but also people who just want to go in for the thrill of it all, for the horror, for the splashing blood and guts and bile and all that stuff. And I do think this film just satisfies all those different quadrants. It's not a 4-quadrant movie. It's not for kids. I'm not trying to say that, but it is kind of appealing for all the different horror fans. Somebody who wants something with a little bit more substance, and then someone who just wants thrills and chills and, suspense and action and just great movie stars doing great things. The film, what it is, I should tell you a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into full spoilers, but it follows Demi Moore's character, who I believe she turns like 50. She kind of does like those like workout TV shows where you're supposed to watch it at home and work out alongside her, this fitness channel or whatever. She was like a famous award-winning actress, and now she does like fitness TV. And the industry basically deems her too old to work in that industry. She's not pretty enough anymore. She's aged out of it, which, first of all, if you're going to cast someone in a role that, is a person who is too old and not hot enough or not attractive enough to be doing this job, Demi Moore is the obvious wrong choice because she's gorgeous. She's stunning. She has aged so well. But I do think that's the point of the movie, to show that even the most beautiful people in the world can still be judged because of their age and because Hollywood has this weird obsession with beauty standards. And I think that's the whole point of the film, is that she is essentially pushed out of her job because she's too old, which again is hilarious because it's Demi Moore, but again, part of the metaphor. And then she decides to take this substance that she's given, which basically allows her to clone a younger, more beautiful version of herself, who is played by Margaret Qualley. And you start to see how this interesting relationship with this clone develops, because while one person or one of the clones exists, the other person has to basically stay in hibernation. And it's up to the person who is living the life to keep that other self, that hibernated being, fed and well kept, and making sure that every 7 days they switch. Otherwise, it's going to break the equilibrium because they are one of the same. They are not two separate entities. They are one of the same. They share the same blood, the same energy. And you start to see, based on selfishness, that this younger version of herself, this younger clone, kind of takes advantage of the fact that she's younger and beautiful and getting attention of all these men in this industry. That you start to see this kind of battle take place between the clones. And that's as far as I'll go, because where this battle goes to is beyond anywhere you could imagine. It just goes further and further and further than the boundaries will allow it to push. And that's what I love about this film so much. It really goes there, but it also, like I said, makes its metaphor known. And for a horror film, if it's like a niche, like indie drama, sometimes metaphor can be a little overbearing. But for a horror film that is generally inherently by nature supposed to be kind of big and broad and thrilling, I don't mind that the metaphor is very obvious. I think it makes a very clear point about beauty standards. And because it is so obvious about it and so in your face about it, quite literally, the first frame you see of Dennis Quaid in this film, who plays her boss, her kind of icky, sketchy, slimy boss, the first shot you see of him is like a very close lens to his face as he's taking a piss at a urinal and then walks out and forgets to wash his hands. And I think that's just a perfect, encapsulation of, the metaphor being so overt what it's trying to say, but doing it in a very stylistic manner to where it feels very effective. And I really enjoyed seeing the different interpretations of this very basic concept of beauty standards and aging in Hollywood specifically. And I think of something like Sunset Boulevard, which came out decades and decades ago, but is doing a very similar thing, showing how, certain actresses are, once they hit a certain age, they're no longer stars. They can no longer play ingenues. They have to play grandmothers, or they have to play like wicked witches or villains. They're never the leading person. But for a man, it's like, Tom Cruise is how old and he's still jumping off buildings. And, Brad Pitt and George Clooney are going to literally be leading a film in just a few days, Wolf. So, like, I think there's a very interesting beauty standard that comes to Hollywood, especially with gender and the idea that women, when they hit a certain age, are like no longer pretty and no longer worth it and no longer marketable and bankable. And I think getting Demi Moore for this film was a really cool kind of way to emphasize that even further from a meta perspective. The fact that like Demi Moore had hit a certain age and then we don't see Demi Moore movies anymore. I don't remember the last time I saw a new Demi Moore movie in theaters. And I think that this is kind of reclaiming her legacy, showing that she's not too old and that she can still play roles like this. She's a very vulnerable actress, especially in this film. She does a lot of nudity in this film. She has a lot of risk-taking scenes, both in horror and in this like kind of provocative, more extreme kind of R-rated nature. And I do think, this is a really good meta commentary for her as well. This idea that like she is one of the most stunning, beautiful actresses and great actresses. She's a great actress on the planet, but once you hit a certain age, it's like, oh, there's a newer, fresher crop of actresses to replace you. And I think that's a really interesting notion that this film explores. And like I said, it doesn't do it subtly, but I think because of its lack of subtlety, it hits the point even further. And I think anyone who, whether they're tapped into this idea of beauty standards in Hollywood or not, is going to walk away feeling some sort of way about it and probably some sort of anger towards the system and the industry. It doesn't try to say, obviously, that all men are bad either. So, like, those people who are going to say it's like an anti-men film, like, no. I mean, it just kind of looks at a very specific type of man in Hollywood, one who thinks they have power and who wants to just like please their own eyes and not thinking about the art or thinking about the people behind the art. The idea that Demi Moore's character here is treated like complete crap and complete shit by the men in the industry, and you can really see this like weird double standard take place that is just unacceptable, especially in 2024 when we're becoming more and more accepting of all different types, all different genders and races and creeds and sexualities. It's never too late, and I think that's a great thing that I Saw the TV Glow, my other favorite horror film of this year, says as well, is like it's never too late to kind of like reclaim your power and like step into your own and find your identity. And for a lot of actresses who have like aged out of certain roles, it's very hard. There's like an identity crisis at hand. And this film also kind of plays with the idea of be careful what you wish for, because Demi Moore wants to be younger. She wants to be fitter. She wants to be beautiful again, which again is funny coming from Demi Moore, but it's also like a point to be made that maybe she should have just been content the way she was, because she shouldn't let Hollywood dictate how she should feel about her own body, her own skin. And I think the fact that this film is directed by a woman does make it a lot better too, because this film does involve a lot of like close-up shots on like women's bottoms, and obviously nudity, and I do think in the male gaze this would have been kind of a different interpretation, but because it's a female gaze, because we're getting a woman's perspective making the film, I think it's only to emphasize the point even further. This is not a film that sexualizes women because it's trying to make the audience horny or happy. It's a movie that sexualizes women to make a point about how men in the industry sexualize women, and how important that beauty standard and that double standard is to acknowledge and to address and to try to put an end to. So I think The Substance is great. As for the horror, I mean, some of the makeup and the practical effects in this thing is some of the best I've ever seen. Like just at the beginning when, the clone has to be birthed out of the first being. So like Demi Moore literally births Margaret Qualley out, but not from a traditional place of birth. She births her from her back. And through that, we also have to see Margaret Qualley then sew the back of Demi Moore's back together. And that's not a huge spoiler because it's like the first body horror thing we see in the movie. I won't go any further into the other body horror stuff, but that's the kind of example of what we're working with. You're seeing like the needle and thread going through the back of Demi Moore. And at that point, I was icky. I was like kind of like squirming in my seat. I was like, ooh, this body horror. And then I didn't realize that it would amp it up 10, 20, 50, 100 notches after that. And I think that's why I love this film so much, is that even when you think you have a grasp on it, even when you're like, okay, I see the metaphor, I get it, there's some good body horror, there's this cool little like rivalry, it almost becomes like an All About Eve thing where it's like the older person and then the younger person who's trying to replace the older person. It's funny, Sunset Boulevard and All About Eve both came out in the same year and were both up against each other for Oscars, and this feels like that weird kind of like fucked up love child of the two. It's dealing with the beauty standards and the aging of Sunset Boulevard, but also the rivalry between old and young of All About Eve. Just an interesting observation. But you start to see, this kind of battle back and forth, and you think you know where it's going, but you really don't. You don't know where it's going. And if you somehow knew where it was going, I hope it's at least satisfying, because it was super satisfying for me. The film opens on this shot of Demi Moore's character's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and the film ends with that same shot, and just the difference in like seeing this whole arc and then watching that first shot with that last shot, it's just such a cool bookend. And that's the thing, is like the style here is so good that even if the metaphor was like lousily portrayed, even if it was a little mishandled at times, even if the performances were just okay, the direction is enough to get me excited. But the good thing is that the metaphor and the writing is good, that the performances are also excellent, so it really just makes it just such a wonderful treat from start to finish. And like I said, despite it being very balls to the wall, batshit crazy, I do think it's still accessible, because I do think it still has enough of other things to please all different types of viewers, to where I don't think this is going to be a film that a lot of people leave being like, that was horrendous. They might think that about like the ending. They might be like, that ending was bad, but like I was in it the whole way through. And I think that's the thing, is it really makes sure that you're in it, that you're in the pocket for the first like hour and a half, so that way in the last hour it can really go for it once it's already earned your trust and earned your viewing pleasure. If it were to start at the level it ends at, I do think there is potential where this could have like a bunch of walkouts and like people just complaining about it, and F cinema score. But I do think because it does such a good job setting everything up, I think everyone's in it by the time the ending, even if the ending doesn't work for you, which it worked for me. It was actually my favorite part. I think the ending is the best part of the movie. But if it doesn't work for you, I still think you're able to be won over enough by what came before it to where you're going to leave feeling a very satisfied type of way. So, I cannot recommend this film more. Demi Moore is incredible. This is my favorite performance I've seen of hers. And once again, it's just so cool to see a film about beauty standards and about how women, once they hit a certain age, can't lead a film, can't command a force and a presence in a film, can't be beautiful in a film. Demi Moore is able to be all those things and more. She's able to kind of stretch her lengths and her talents, to ways we've never seen before. And I think especially in that last half, we are seeing a different side of Demi Moore than we've ever seen. And I know the makeup helps a lot with that. If you know, but I do think, she really goes for it. And it's really, really satisfying to see. I would love to see this win an Oscar for makeup. I think at this point, it should be a lock for a nomination. If there's any sort of horror bias, I don't think it would be found in the makeup category. Also, looking at the competition, like Dune's there, Beetlejuice is there, but like this is definitively the best makeup I've seen in years, maybe decades, maybe ever. Like this is one of my favorite portrayals of movie makeup I've ever seen, because like I said, there's that stitching of the back and that's where you think it's going, but then it goes even further, and that's same to be said about its makeup as well. So Margaret Qualley is great. She plays this younger version of Demi Moore really, really well. I think Demi Moore has a lot more to chew into. I think Margaret Qualley has to play it kind of one note for a specific reason, but toward the end, again, Margaret Qualley kind of gets to stretch her bounds and really, make a big statement as well. I think she's having a great year between Drive Away Dolls and Kinds of Kindness and this and Dennis Quaid. Really, really good in this film. Very much surprised me. I mean, he's having an interesting summer too. He's playing one of the greatest, most vile villains we've ever seen in film, and he was also in this movie too. So I think he's having an interesting year. But I do think this is a great performance from him. He understands this role completely. He knows exactly how to literally chew into this role. If you know, you know. Oh my gosh. If you are sensitive to chewing scenes, the scene where Dennis Quaid sits down to eat some shrimp, just be mindful. You might need to put your earplugs in for that one. If you are bothered by the people eating popcorn around you, just be mindful that there's something even more vile going on screen. But again, all the vileness, all the very extreme nature of things, it all serves a purpose and serves such a beautiful purpose. And so The Substance is a great movie that I'm very happy to recommend. And it's so cool that Mubi gets to distribute it, because Mubi is a very small streaming service. They don't get a lot of big hits. Their biggest hit so far was Decision to Leave, which was in theaters and then decided to leave pretty early. So I do think The Substance, this could be really big for that studio and really kind of putting Mubi on the map as well. So thank you so much for watching The Substance. As I said, New York Film Fest is coming up soon, so I will be here to cover all the films I'm going to see at New York Film Fest: Anora, Blitz, The Seed of Sacred Fig, a lot of films. So I'm very excited to be telling you all about that. So stay tuned. A lot of more reviews coming this week, but I wanted to get this one out because I need you all to see it before it leaves theaters. If it's already left theaters, ask your theaters to put it back, demand it back. Please have it happen. It's so good, and it deserves to be seen with an audience in a theater. Please, like the reactions, I wish I had a camera to film my audience's reactions. It was incredible. But thank you for watching. What did you think of The Substance? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know if you loved it as much as I did. Did you love the ending as much as I did, or did the ending kind of sour you on the film, or was it enough? The first few hours of the film, were they enough to kind of make up for the ending if you didn't like it? But I hope you did like it, and if you didn't, be respectful in the comments if you didn't. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Bye.